The year is 1492. I am Christopher Columbus, captain of 3 ships, the Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Niña. Our expedition departed from the Spanish port of Palos de la Frontera on August 3rd. Our goal, to find a new route to the Indies by sailing west, across an ocean no one has ever crossed. Most called me a fool. Sailors whispered that the sea ended in a great abyss, where ships fell into eternal darkness. But I believed the earth was round, that beyond the horizon lay new lands, waiting to be found. More than 2 months have passed since our departure. Now, on the night of October 11th, as I stand on the deck of the Santa Maria, the wind carries the faint scent of land. And when the lookout's cry cuts through the darkness, Tierra, Tierra, I understand that the moment I have lived for has arrived. We have discovered a new world. Before we begin the story, subscribe to POV Story Exped, the channel where you'll dive into incredible expeditions, journeys, and discoveries, and experience them all through the eyes of those who were there. On August 3rd, 1492, we left the shores of Spain. The town of Palos de la Frontera faded behind us, and before us stretched an endless sea. 3 ships, the Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Niña, sailed under the banners of Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand of Aragon. I stood on the stern of the Santa Maria, watching as the coastline disappeared into the morning haze. There were about 90 men on board, seasoned sailors from Andalusia, navigators, and even a few who had never seen the open sea before. Some had volunteered, others had been ordered to join. In their eyes, I saw both faith and fear. Rumors had spread that monsters lived beyond the Atlantic, creatures that devoured ships whole. The first days were calm. A warm wind from the southeast filled our sails, and the ships moved swiftly westward. I ordered a daily log to be kept, recording every course, every sign, every change in wind or current. Yet, to keep morale high, I deliberately reduced the distances noted in the crew's version of the log. They were not to know how far we had already drifted from the safety of Spain. By August 10th, we sighted the Canary Islands. There, we stopped to repair the Pinta. Her rudder had broken loose. For several days, we anchored at La Gomera, replenishing our barrels with water, wine, and supplies. I knew this would be our last familiar shore. Beyond it lay only the unknown. On September 6th, we left the Canaries behind. Ahead stretched more than 4,000 miles of uncharted ocean. As the islands faded into the mist, a few sailors crossed themselves. I overheard one whisper, "Not even God will find us now." Those first weeks tested my resolve. By day, I spoke calmly with my officers. By night, I stood alone on deck, studying the stars. They were my guides, constant, patient, and silent. And yet, I could not escape the thought, was I leading these men toward India or toward the edge of the world? We left the Canary Islands on the 6th of September, and the sea greeted us with silence. The wind was steady, gentle, as if the very air itself wished us good fortune. During the first days, the crew was calm. Some mended ropes. Others prayed. A few sang old Andalusian songs as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. In those moments, when the sky turned red and the water shone gold, it was easy to believe that the ocean would indeed open a path to India. But calm is a sailor's most dangerous illusion. It drifts beside you quietly until it turns into fear. By the 13th of September, the compass began to behave strangely. Its needle, which had always pointed north with certainty, now trembled, hesitated. I was the first to notice it and ordered silence. But a ship is a living thing. News travels through its timbers faster than the wind through its sails. By nightfall, everyone knew. Some whispered that the sun had changed its course. Others said that God himself had turned away from us for daring to sail so far from his lands. That same night, as darkness settled over the ocean, I saw something beneath the hull. The sea glowing faintly, green and alive. It was the phosphorescence of plankton, a natural light I'd seen before, yet this time it felt different. The water seemed to breathe, to pulse with a rhythm not our own. The men called it the devil's fire. Even I, who had studied the sea all my life, felt something move inside me, a quiet unease I couldn't name. Days passed, and the wind began to die. The ocean turned smooth as glass, and our ships drifted helplessly. Each hour of silence gnawed at the crew's faith. They gathered near the barrels of water, speaking in low voices, glancing at me as if I had led them into a trap. I overheard one of the older sailors mutter, "He's not searching for India. He's searching for death." I pretended not to hear, but the words cut deeper than any storm. On the night of the 17th, the sea began to hum. It was not the wind, nor the current, but a low sound rising from the deep. Slow, steady, like the breathing of some sleeping beast. Some men swore they heard voices in it. Others fell to their knees in prayer. I did not stop them. Perhaps faith was the only compass left when all others failed. At dawn, the horizon lay silent and endless. The sea no longer seemed our ally. It was listening, and I no longer knew what it intended to do with us. The sea had become our home. 3 weeks had passed since we left the Canaries, and I could no longer remember what still land felt like beneath my feet. Every morning, I awoke to the same sounds: the groaning of timbers, the whisper of ropes, the shouts of men half buried in routine. The wind was kind, the sky clear, and it seemed the ocean itself wanted to lull us into believing the worst was over. But the men were growing restless. They didn't know how far we had come, and I didn't tell them. In the log I kept for the crew, I shortened the distances, not out of deceit, but out of mercy. Had they known the truth, they would have broken long before the horizon did. On the 25th of September, the Pinta signaled. Rodrigo Sanchez, one of her sailors, had spotted something green in the water. A small boat went out, and soon a fresh branch was brought aboard. Green leaves still clinging to it, damp with sap. I held it in my hands and felt my pulse quicken. It was not a miracle, but a message. Land was near. I called my officers and showed them the branch. Even the oldest among them smiled. Martin Alonso Pinzon, captain of the Pinta, said that if the wind held, we would see land within days. I told him that even if the wind abandoned us, faith would carry us farther than any current. But the days passed, and the horizon remained empty. On the 29th, the sky darkened, and the waves turned sharp. The crew grew uneasy again. I heard curses whispered behind me, the kind that carried the weight of despair. One man muttered that it was better to die at home than here, lost among the waves. I did not turn around. A captain cannot be human when his men need a symbol. By the 3rd of October, the tension had reached its breaking point. At night, I heard arguments between the ships, men shouting across the water. Some demanded to turn back. Others wanted to cast me overboard and steer for Spain. At dawn, I gathered the crew and said, "If in 3 days we see no land, we will return." My words hung in the air like mist. I saw disbelief in their eyes, but I no longer needed them to believe. It was enough that I still did. That evening, as the sun sank low, a bird appeared, flying close to the waves, its wings cutting through the wind. It came from the east and vanished toward the west. In that moment, something inside me shifted. If I were another man, I might have fallen to my knees, because I knew, with absolute certainty, we were close, very close. The wind changed on the 10th of October. It blew from the east, strong and steady, as if the sea itself had decided to push us forward. For days, we had drifted, uncertain. But that morning, the sails filled again, and hope returned to the decks like sunlight after a storm. I could feel it in the air, in the way the men spoke softer, in the way their hands moved with purpose. Even those who had cursed me began to work without complaint. Still, no one dared to say it aloud, but we all felt the same thing. Something was near. That night, I stood at the bow of the Santa Maria, my eyes fixed on the horizon. The sky was heavy with stars, brighter than I had ever seen them, and the ocean reflected them so perfectly that it seemed we were sailing through the heavens themselves. I thought of Spain, of Isabella, of the promise I had made to bring her riches and glory. Yet, at that moment, I wanted nothing of gold or fame, only to see the faintest line of land, to know that I had not led 90 souls into nothingness. At midnight, a strange light appeared far off, small, flickering, like a candle on the edge of the world. I called for Pedro Gutierrez, my steward, and together we watched it shimmer, vanish, then reappear. It could have been a trick of the sea, but my heart refused to doubt. I ordered the helmsman to keep our course and told the men to stay alert. Hours passed. The wind howled softly through the rigging, and the ships creaked like old bones. Some of the men prayed. Others just stared into the darkness. Then, at 2 hours past midnight, a cry split the silence. Sharp, desperate, and filled with disbelief. "Oh, tierra! Tierra!" The voice came from the Pinta. Rodrigo de Triana had seen it first. A dark line on the horizon, faint but real. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the sound spread from ship to ship. Shouts, laughter, sobbing. I heard the men fall to their knees, thanking God, embracing one another, their fear melting into joy. I could not speak. My throat closed, and my eyes burned with tears I hadn't known I was holding. I gripped the railing and stared toward that black shape ahead, half hidden by the sea's mist. It was nothing more than a shadow, but to me, it was the answer to every night spent in doubt, every curse, every sleepless hour. We had crossed the ocean, and before the sun would rise, we would set foot on a new world. At dawn, the sea was still. The horizon glowed faintly, a thin line of gold rising out of the dark water. I stood at the bow of the Santa Maria and watched the light grow stronger, and there, where the ocean met the sky, I saw it clearly. Land. Not a shadow, not a dream, but real earth. Trees, tall and green, touched the morning sun, and I felt my legs weaken beneath me. 90 men had followed me into the unknown, and now we had reached the edge of a new world. We dropped anchor just off the shore. The air smelled different, heavy, alive, filled with the scent of plants and something sweet I couldn't name. I could hear the waves breaking gently on the sand, and beyond that, birds, hundreds of them, crying out as if to welcome us. For a long moment, no one spoke. The men stood in silence, staring at the land as if afraid it might vanish if they looked away. When the first boat touched the beach, I stepped onto the sand and sank slightly into its warmth. I knelt and kissed the ground. The grains stuck to my lips, but I didn't wipe them away. Behind me, the men followed, some laughing, others weeping. We planted the royal banner of Castile and Aragon into the sand, and I named the island San Salvador, Holy Savior, for surely only divine grace could have carried us here. I prayed aloud, thanking God for his mercy, but inside I felt something deeper, not joy, not pride, but awe. The world I had known ended behind me across the ocean. What lay ahead was beyond imagination. As we explored the beach, we saw footprints. Then figures emerged from the trees. Tall, bronze-skinned men, their bodies painted, their eyes wide and calm. They carried no weapons, only spears of reed and fish nets. One of them approached us, slowly, without fear. I raised my hand in greeting, and he did the same. In that instant, two worlds touched, neither knowing what it meant. They spoke words none of us understood, soft and musical, and smiled when we offered small gifts of glass beads and cloth. I thought of how gentle they seemed, how curious, how human. And yet, as the sun set behind the palms, a thought crept into my mind like a shadow. These people had no idea what had just arrived on their shores. We had found the new world. But perhaps it was the world that had found us. For the first few days, the island felt like a dream. The air was soft, the sky impossibly blue, and everything smelled of life: fruit, salt, rain, and earth. The men wandered along the beaches and into the forest, touching the trees as if afraid they might dissolve into mist. Birds with bright feathers flew low over our heads, and the water in the streams ran clearer than anything I had ever seen. It was a land untouched, unspoiled by greed or war. The people, the Taino, came to us without fear. They were tall, well-built, their skin bronze, and their eyes kind. They wore little clothing, only strings of beads and small gold ornaments around their necks. When they saw our ships, they thought we had come from the heavens. They brought us fruit, cotton, and parrots in exchange for glass beads, bells, and bits of colored cloth. They gave freely, smiling as if the idea of ownership was foreign to them. I wrote in my journal that they would make fine servants, for they were gentle and quick to learn. Even as I wrote those words, I felt the weight of them, as if I were betraying the wonder I saw in their faces. But the men around me spoke only of gold. They pointed to the tiny rings on the natives' ears and whispered of mountains filled with treasure. The word oro began to echo through the camp like a prayer. One evening, as the sun sank over the palm trees, I sat alone near the water. The sea was calm, and the island glowed in the fading light. The Taino children played nearby, their laughter carrying across the sand. I thought of Spain, of the court, the promises, the hunger for glory. And for the first time, I felt the distance not as miles of sea, but as something greater. A gulf between the world I had left and the one I had found. They were a peaceful people. They had no weapons beyond fishing spears, no walls, no armies. I wondered what they saw when they looked at us. Men dressed in metal, carrying fire and thunder in our hands. Did they think we were gods? Or did they sense that behind our smiles was a storm they could not yet see? That night, when the campfire burned low, I wrote one line in my log. They are without evil or deceit, and they will give us all that they have. I did not yet understand what those words would come to mean. By November, the sea was calling us again. The island of San Salvador had given us peace, but not answers. The men had begun to whisper of more islands to the west, of places where the gold shone brighter and the people wore it freely. I could not stop them from dreaming. I dreamed the same. And so we set our sails once more, leaving behind the calm beaches and the Taino who had watched us depart with quiet eyes. The ocean that had once terrified us now felt almost familiar. The winds carried us westward, toward a vast land that rose from the horizon like a cloud, Cuba. We thought it might be the eastern shore of Asia, the long-sought Indies. The air smelled of flowers and smoke, and rivers as wide as harbors flowed from the forests. The men believed we were near the court of the great Khan himself. I let them believe. Perhaps I believed too. But the sea never allows peace for long. In mid-December, as we sailed along the northern coast of Hispaniola, the sky darkened. The wind turned sharp, the waves grew high, and the Santa Maria groaned like a wounded beast. I ordered the anchor dropped, but the current dragged us toward a hidden reef. The ship struck with a sound that split the night, wood tearing, men shouting, the sea roaring louder than prayer. We worked through the darkness, throwing barrels and cargo overboard, trying to lighten her, but it was no use. The Santa Maria, my flagship, was dying beneath me. When dawn came, she lay broken in the shallows, her mast tilted like a cross against the sky. With the help of the local people, who came to us in canoes, we saved what we could: food, tools, weapons. They showed no fear, only kindness, and helped us carry the wood to shore. From the wreckage, we built a small fort and named it La Navidad, the fortress of the Nativity. I left 39 men there, under the command of Diego de Arana, to guard our supplies and trade with the natives. Before I sailed away, I warned them to treat the people with respect, for their goodwill was our greatest treasure. They promised. They smiled. And I wanted to believe them. As I stepped back onto the deck of the Niña, I looked once more at the fort, the first Spanish settlement in this new world. The flag of Castile fluttered above it, proud and bright in the wind. I did not know that it would not be standing when I returned. The sea was calm again, as if nothing had happened. It carried us eastward toward home. But I felt the weight of two worlds on my shoulders, one left behind and one just beginning. The wind turned cold in January. The ocean that had carried us west now stretched before us again, endless, merciless, and changed. I had thought the voyage home would bring peace, but the sea does not reward those who presume to conquer it. It remembers. We sailed eastward aboard the Niña and the Pinta, the only ships that remained. Behind us lay the wreck of the Santa Maria and the men I had left at La Navidad. I told myself they would be safe, that the people of the island were gentle, that God would protect them. But even as I prayed, doubt whispered like wind through the rigging. The sky darkened on the 14th of February. Clouds gathered like a wall, and the air grew heavy with the smell of rain and fear. By nightfall, the storm was upon us. Waves rose higher than the masts, and the wind screamed through the sails. The sea was not the calm expanse we had crossed before. It was alive, furious, as if trying to reclaim what we had taken from it. I ordered the men to lighten the ship. Barrels, cargo, even precious maps were thrown overboard. The Pinta vanished in the darkness. I could only pray they had survived. The Niña groaned and shuddered with every wave. I fell to my knees on the deck, soaked and trembling, and swore to God that if He spared us, I would tell the world of His mercy before my own glory. When morning came, the storm had passed, and we were still afloat. The sea lay quiet again, innocent as a child who had just confessed its rage. The men slept where they fell, too weak even to speak. I stood alone at the helm and watched the pale sun rise, the same sun that had risen over Spain, over San Salvador, over the edge of the world. Weeks later, we sighted land, the coast of Portugal. I had set out from Spain as a dreamer. I returned as something else, though I did not yet know what. When I finally reached the port of Palos in March, bells rang and crowds gathered. They called me Admiral of the Ocean Sea. They spoke of glory, of wealth, of a new empire. But as I looked at their faces, I thought not of riches or titles, but of the people I had met. Those who had smiled when they saw us, who had helped us without fear or greed. They did not know the world was about to change forever. That night, as I sat by the harbor, I wrote in my journal one final line. We have found another world, but I fear it may be ourselves we have discovered instead.